There's a beauty in the scriptures that oftentimes the readings provide for you the entirety of the homily, and there's no need for a homily. And so in today's readings, I reflect upon that many of you have asked me of my vocation story, of where I came to be where I'm at. And so in reflecting upon these readings, which touch so profoundly on the topic of freedom, I will share with you kind of my personal experience with this understanding of freedom. I was born and raised a cradle Catholic my entire life. I went to Mass, went to confession, I went to catechism, I went through the confirmation prep, was confirmed, and lived my life. It was never really a part of who I was. It was only something that I did. And I remember growing up, at a very young age, my grandmother taught me to pray. She said, you need to pray before you eat and after you eat. You also need to pray before you go to bed. So that's one of the one constancies within my life that I kept growing up. Growing up, I never really fit in with the school kids. I always had a hard time with being able to be accepted, both at home and in school. In school, more often than not, I found myself different from the rest of the guys. Didn't like sports, didn't like to work out. And that was the thing the guys did, so I never did it, so I didn't really fit in. And at home, I found myself with this pressure of for my parents to want for me to succeed, to thrive. But dwelling on this aspect of being accepted, I was unable to comprehend how was I supposed to succeed in life if there was this void that was present. So I kind of fast forward now to my 8th grade year of middle school. And so in that year, again, nothing much different. It was still difficult for me to fit into school. Didn't really find a place. I was kind of the odd one out. But in particular, that summer, my father had built his dream home, and we were about to move. And we were about to transfer, I was about to transfer into a new school district, to a new high school. So for me, it was a fresh start. But something happened that summer that completely changed my life. That summer, my mother fell into depression. And I had no concept of what depression really was or what it entailed. But it happened to her that summer. And I remember our family moved into my uncle's home. And at that point, my mother didn't really want to live at home by herself. And so we moved into my uncle's home. And you can imagine for yourself, a 13, 14-year-old kid going through hormones, growth pains, moving into a household, 8 people. A home that was probably less than 1,000 square foot with 2 bedrooms and a bath. And so it was a very difficult summer, and I thought to myself, this is probably the worst summer of my life. This is probably the worst, and nothing can be better. And that summer, I slept the entirety of that summer on a cot in the living room, because there wasn't room in the rooms. And I remember every night getting up and praying before bed, because that was the thing that I did. That was what I was told. That was what I was instructed to do. And so, as a creature of habit, I did it. I sat up really, and I prayed the Our Father. I got halfway into the prayer, and I remember thinking to myself, this makes no sense. I don't feel anything. And I started to question this whole idea of what I was taught in catechism of God is love, God is mercy. He's this great guy that you can go to in times of need. He'll solve the problems. But I saw run in front of my eyes my mother, who I believe to be a very devout woman, who put herself to the service of the church, to the parish, to the family. She gave herself to us. And I saw that she suffered. And I kind of asked, does God really exist? If they're suffering, how is this God real? Either he's real, or what I was taught in catechism class is all wrong. And so I started venting that night. I started complaining and telling God how much I hated him, how much I didn't believe in him, and how much life sucked, and that he's not real. Now, at the very end of it, either because I was tired, or because there was something that happened there, but there was a sign of relief. So I went back to bed. Put that on repeat. That happens again for the next couple weeks. Get up, pray the Our Father, halfway through, doesn't work out, go back to venting, go back to complaining. And I remember very vividly one night, something stirred in me. And I looked at the image of the Holy Family, and I said to myself, why are they so happy? Why can't my family be like that? And I started to gamble. And I said to Mary, and this is gambling with Mary, not at the casino, for all those who are questioning that. But I said, Mary, let's put a bet down. If you heal my mother, I will give myself to you. I said, you know what? I'm courageous. Let's go a step further. I said, Mary, if you heal my mother, and she's well, I will abstain from meat for the rest of my life on Fridays for you. Now looking back, I'm thinking to myself, whoa, that was a big commitment that I was not ready to make at that point in my life. But I did it. I did it because I was desperate. Not because I believed in God or any way, but I was desperate and I wanted to do something. And for me, in that moment, I was in control. So I fast forward to a week, nothing happened. Nothing came about of it. Fast forward to a week, that Saturday, the statue of Fatima was traveling around the diocese, and it had come to our home parish. And so my mom wanted to go. So my dad promised her he would take her. But everything that could have gone wrong that weekend went wrong. That Saturday, my father had overtime, and so he was late. My mother had a meltdown that morning. I was in one of my moods, and I was not having it. So my father gets to the house, picks us up, an entire car ride, the worst time in my life, really. They were arguing, and she was crying the entirety of the 15 minutes from the house to the parish. So what I do, as any teenager would do, I placed my earbuds in, kind of zoned out. So we get to the parish, and we look out, and there's hundreds of people gathered outside the church. And we see that the statue of Fatima is being brought into the caravan to be moved to the next location. So in that desperation, my father dropped us off. He said he was going to go on a car ride because he needed space. And my mother, I saw the desperation in her eyes. I saw the fear and the anxiety in her eyes. And I was pissed off. And I said, you need to prove to me that you exist, Mary. So long and behold, I think to this day, out of providence, the statue was pulled out and it faced in our direction. I didn't recognize in that moment what had happened, but she had answered my prayer. And she was there. So my mother went up to the statue, placed a rose on her foot. Life continues. Fast forward to the end of that summer, my mom, by the grace of God, was healed. She was able to pull herself out of the depression, and we continued to live our lives. Now into high school, I forget about it, think of the past, it happened, whatever. Went to high school, and again, this emptiness inside of me of wanting to be accepted amongst my peers, be accepted amongst those in my family. I desired and searched for freedom. Freedom from my parents, freedom from the restriction of the church, freedom to choose who I wanted to be and what I wanted to do in my life. And so I started getting a glimpse of that freedom. Started hanging out with the wrong crowd of people. Started doing the things that I thought would fill that void in my life that'd make me happy. But in actuality, it didn't. It left me wanting more and more and more. And I fell into the trap of instant gratification. And I saw myself spiral out of control towards the end of my senior year. But it was in the senior year of high school that my grandma passed away. And when she passed away, I was faced with this question of, what is the meaning of life? Why am I here? What am I doing? right? So often we kind of come to that point in our lives where we ask, what is the bigger meaning of things? And so I went back recognizing at some point in my high school that Mary had answered my prayer. And I said, Mary, I went to you a couple of years ago and I made this promise to you. It seems to come back to me for some reason. I need your help. I'm desperate. I don't know what to do. Long and behold, this most of the stories, but long and behold, after the funeral, my grandma's sister, who was present, asked me, have you ever considered becoming a priest? I thought to myself, no. That's really the last thing I wanted to be. I was like, a priest? He's not free to do whatever he wants. He's confined to all these rules. Why would I want to be a priest? But something tugged at my heart. I firmly believe that it was Mary. She was saying, remember that promise you made to me 4 years ago? Is it still there? And so I found myself out of desperation, out of this, didn't know what else to do, entered seminary. So the moral of the story is, I sought for freedom, but I found them in the wrong places. The freedom that I really desired is a freedom that I now understand. John Paul II would say, freedom is not the ability to choose whatever, but rather the right to do what is ought to be done. I was blessed at a young age to be able to realize that. But so often within our world, we're bombarded with all of this in the culture that says, if you do this, you're going to be happy. There's step programs of happiness is going to be fulfilled if you do this, A or B. If you hang out with these people, if you wear this, if you try this. But we recognize that the Lord is patiently wanting us to choose Him. He's given us freedom to choose Him. And we find this in the first reading. If you choose to do my commandments. How obvious is that? We sometimes confine religion and belief in God and going to Mass to be another thing to do, a restriction in our lives to the freedom. And I speak most heavily to those in my generation. At every Mass there's a different crowd. And in particular, this crowd gathers many of the young people. So I asked you that question. Are you free? And if you're not, ask why. And the more important question is God in the picture? Because when God is not in the picture, our freedom is warped, and our freedom becomes an enslavement. But it's only being free to choose God that we're able to live freely of how He wanted us to be for happiness. And it's not simply a choosing to do His commandments as if it's the thing to do as Catholics, but rather we see in the gospel the Lord demanding and challenging us to go beyond that law, to go beyond those commandments, and to enshrine them to be who we are. He doesn't want to confine us. He wants to allow us the opportunity to choose. And all of our choices have consequences, negative or positive. But He's very clear in that if we choose Him and His way of life, we will truly be free and we will truly be happy because we're all wired for God. And it may seem that sometimes God isn't helping me. God isn't here. I can't find God. But He's searching for us. And this is a scriptural understanding of who God is. We don't look for Him. He looks for us. And He provides for us these graces. Grace at baptism. Today after Mass, we will have 2 baptisms. And within that, that's a freedom to accept the Lord's invitation to enter into the divine life, but also the grace to live that out, which is confirmed upon us at confirmation. We don't confirm our faith. the Lord confirms it for us. He confirms the grace and the faith that was given to us in baptism to allow us to live that out. And so in all that I am saying, I ask that you read through the scriptures again today and to reevaluate and ask the question, am I free? Am I free to choose God? And if I'm not, what's holding me back? And to allow the Lord to speak to each and every one of you. Lord, your servant is listening. Lord, your servant is listening. Lord, your servant is listening. And I guarantee you, he will answer. And he will give you the freedom that you all desire.